It's that time. You know us. You love us. Welcome back to Mars on Life. And my girlfriend is giving me a rolling of the eyes, but that's okay because we are back once again this Wednesday. Stop looking at me like that. Oh my God. God, you want to talk about judgmental? Anyways, welcome back to another episode of Mars on Life. I'm your host, of course, Sebastian Shug. With me as always.
Hello there, everyone. This is Ryan Mancini.
So, I think just sort of addressing a few things on the table, get a little bit of logistics out of the way before we go into our two main topics. In recent news, and I'm going to pass the baton on to you because I feel like you have more to say about this. Go right ahead.
Yeah, there have been a lot of developments, that some of which have just been coming out just as sort of normal breaking news happens, and then there have been a few incidents over the last few weeks that we haven't really had a chance to bring up. That's largely just because of the guests that we've had on and trying to gear the focus onto either themselves or a particular subject. And just kind of want to give a few points. Rest in peace to the great Jerry Stiller, aka Frank Costanza from Seinfeld. His passing was very impactful on me, just because, and Sebastian, you know this, Seinfeld has a very special place in my heart. And, despite times where such a character would stress you out, Frank Costanza was sort of one of the biggest sources of relief at a time when I really needed it in my life. And of course, I mean, it's Seinfeld. You want relief, you got the whole show for that. But Jerry Stiller was a real good guy. Also like to point out, more on the opposite side of the coin, a happy belated birthday to the man, the myth, the legend, the poet, Bob Dylan, who just turned the ripe old age of 79. So it's definitely good to know that he's still making music, and in a lot of ways his music is still very relevant. If you haven't had a chance, his first documentary with Martin Scorsese, No Direction Home, is available on Netflix. So definitely check it out over there. It's kind of long, but still worth it. And on top of that, just want to give another shout out to another Titan who has sadly left us, Larry Kramer. He passed away today. He was a activist during the years of the AIDS epidemic. He was the guy that kind of got current coronavirus character Anthony Fauci sort of be on his side in regards to making it clear how much of a major health crisis that the AIDS epidemic was, especially at its peak. So R.I.P. to Larry Kramer. And we've also just hit that milestone of 100,000 deaths due to coronavirus. Probably two of the most notable examples of how this was expressed in the media was the New York Times front page that referred to it as a incalculable loss, and of course featured all the names of all of those who have sadly passed from COVID-19. LA Times had it a little bit more poignant at Trump Golf's as deaths reach 100,000. I bring these up very quickly just because in journalism there is an aesthetic. There is something that permeates through and becomes one of those, spellbound, memorable moments in reporting. I guess the easiest example would be Walter Cronkite and how he reacted to JFK being assassinated. There's something of an art form in there, even though in reality it's just sheer humanity.
Right.
And this was something that I think both newspapers, obviously they touch on it, but I think it's just about how poignant and how dire the situation is. And I think, not that I'm trying to put these two papers up against each other, but I think the LA Times hit it in a much more sardonic way that kind of wakes us up to the situation we're in. The kind of never-ending Black Mirror episode that we've been living in for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, just right now, as of recording, there have been a lot of huge protests going on in downtown LA regarding the recent murder of George Floyd, who was an unarmed black man who was killed by police I believe it was in Minneapolis. So,
yes. I don't know if
as
I don't know
much
if you,
as it's something that I get a little anxious about because of COVID, but I get the sentiment. I get the sentiments, and I stand in solidarity with those who are out there.
I don't know if you ended up seeing the protests going on. I was actually watching them on the news on CBS. They were blocking the 101
I was
freeway,
too.
north and south.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it was pretty ridiculous. I mean, especially when it got down to the part of the I think it was a man who jumped on the car and then he sort of face planted after the cop car sped away. They were just playing that clip.
No,
over
I
and
saw
over
that
again.
too.
Yeah. It had a sort of a dynamic shot of I think it was the Minneapolis police station as well, and they were just tearing it to bits, throwing pylons everywhere, and I mean, needless to say, it's a I really got to choose my words carefully here, because this, the reaction I would say is fairly justified in this circumstance. Again.
Yeah.
And speaking for both of us as individuals who really don't have that fear, it's just, it does make you think, and it is just I'm just out of a loss for words, to tell you the truth. So,
I mean, if anything, I feel as though, obviously the kind of
I definitely wouldn't want.
I don't know what would be the right word.
I definitely wouldn't want our commentary of the situation to trivialize it. By no means. But
no, of course.
I
mean,
because it's not like we can speak from the perspective of someone who has legitimate fear of walking the streets of any state. Okay.
Right.
And I think as much as people want to spring into action and immediately demand justice, what do we do? Other than hope that this doesn't happen again. But we've been hoping that this hasn't happened again for the past two circumstances with Ahmaud Arbery and
Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. Because obviously in the recent history of LA, even though 1992, I should be careful because I'm going to make myself sound really old by being like, oh, well, 1992, that was so long ago. I guess the memories of 1992 and the 60s, I think, are something that LA, and especially LA, just, the main city of LA, I'm not talking about like Northridge and the places that you and I traverse. I mean, like where City Hall is, where the LA Times used to function. Like, there's a history there that dates all the way back several decades. And it's history that LA, I think, has fought very hard to make sure it doesn't happen again. But at the same time,
I think it's how
you
many
know,
times can you wish for it to not happen?
LA,
Like, as much as I think
well,
sympathy and
it's, yeah.
condolences are necessary, it's not a matter of
Mhm.
how much more can we espouse sympathy and condolences. It's a matter of when are we going to stop doing that in order to actually take some action or actually see some action.
Exactly. And
You
I
know,
think
and I know that
that's
that's
just it
a very
too.
far-fetched claim because no one, I want to say that no one knows what to do. And I know that
Mhm.
people want immediate results, but the double-edged sword in that is this going to happen to other people in the interim of this not ever happening again? If I'm playing devil's advocate, probably. Unfortunately, you know,
Mhm.
it's the Nietzsche subconscious in the back of my mind saying that all is doomed, but I think I
Well,
think given the
I
circumstance,
do think
it's
it's something that can be accomplished in our lifetimes.
yeah, no, in our lifetimes, but what is the time span of that, and how uncomfortable is it not knowing what that is? Very.
Right.
So,
Right. No, I mean, it's difficult because, you know, we really do like to think that, things changed in between, the early 90s with the LA riots into the 21st century. And the fact of the matter is that you had a lot of issues going on following the recession that really changed the class dynamics of the country in a way that, this is basically where you start to realize where race and class in America they start to interlock with each other, and you start getting kind of explanations as to why things are the way they are in terms of class and race. And it's almost like this downward spiral that we've come into in the years since the recession, where it's like we're reverting back to, it's part of the whole mythology of the MAGA belief of,
right.
we want to go back to the way it was in the 1950s. And it's like, well, that's not good for just about everybody else who isn't a white man. And
No, yeah, no,
that's
exactly.
disturbing and disgusting. That's kind of the trajectory we're on, and it's despicable because, again, like, and maybe I'm bringing this up just because it's something that I was watching a while back. The riots, like,
The
that's
Rodney
enough
King
to
one.
show like how much frustration people are going to have.
Wait,
And,
I'm sorry. Are you referencing are you
I'm not
referencing the
saying that
riots?
that's
Are you referencing the riots from today, or like in contrast, Rodney King and like those ones?
in contrast, yeah,
Okay.
like the LA riots back in the 90s, yeah, in 92. I mean, to me, it's something that I've listened to enough LA based, educators and eyewitnesses to that time period who have said that's always something that's kind of lurking on the back of our minds whenever these kinds of things repeat themselves.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just kind of a matter of where we go from here, really. I mean, because there's no explanation for how we move on from this other than justice is necessary at this point. And we've had enough, judicial malpractice in this country that doesn't fill you with a lot of hope. Hell, I used to work for a newspaper that once had to report on the actions of one of the four schmucks that beat up Rodney King. He had like a DUI in recent years.
Right.
But outside of that, I mean, we've kind of just been following the news regarding friends of the show. And before we get into our first topic, I just want to give a special shout out to close friend of the show, a mentor of mine, and somebody who I talk to and think about just about every day, Pete DiCamarillo. His grandmother recently passed away from coronavirus. And on top of that as well, we have Shawnee Badger, who was our first guest. Her aunt is in the hospital. She unfortunately contracted COVID, so we just want to give our heartfelt best wishes and solidarity with both Pete and with Shawnee. We love you both. And it's stuff like this that definitely gets you thinking with everything going on and how everything's been handled, that you kind of don't know how to go forward except to just go forward.
Right.
You know.
God, I hate being so negative, so uncertain, you know, and I hate to kind of be the type of guy to segue into something humorous, but I think at the end of the day,
at this
as
point,
much
that's what
it is kind of necessary, yeah. With that, we have a discussion to continue.
Yes. Because, you know, as we've said before, coronavirus is something that, you know, it's something we obviously take very seriously on and off the show. But
Yes.
The society that coronavirus has brought us deserves to be openly mocked. Frankly, just because between what's happening to the industry that I work for, seeing the leader of the free world say things like putting very powerful light in the skin, it really does feel like one giant Black Mirror episode. And it especially feels that way when you and your friend do an episode talking about what society has become and dissecting that into two characters from two very great Steven Spielberg films. But then also noticing that obviously you weren't the only person with that very idea, to which I bring up this very wonderful yet haunting story from the LA Times. We love the LA Times. We definitely very supportive of the stuff that they do, and, you know, out of all the legacy publications, they're the most local, obviously, and we hope for them to keep on going. We have to talk about this story with this great headline. You knew.
Myself. I really am.
Now my boy is dead. Trump is as craven as the mayor in Jaws.
Did you not fucking call it?
Well,
it feels like our last episode about this is such a prediction to this headline. And
yeah.
Like, go on, please.
Except our episode came after this article was published. That's the funny part. I did not read this before that episode. Literally the most inspiration I got was from a meme. So I had no idea this story existed until a week or so ago.
So this episode is the spiritual
very poignant
successor.
with this story. Yeah. I mean, let's put it this way. It's spiritual in the sense that when you think about some of the characters in not only Jaws 1, but I'm going to extend it to Jaws 2 because I just recently rewatched that.
Really?
And it's far more than just the mayor who's a chump. Like, he's got a crack team of imbeciles that will do anything in their power to keep the beaches open. And it doesn't help that the chief of police, Martin Brody, is literally losing his mind, even though he actually is right. But what's terrifying also with this story is that it opens up talking about actress Lee Fierro, who recently passed away from coronavirus at the age of 91. She played the mother of Alex Kintner in Jaws. That's the little boy who gets eaten by the shark. And she goes up to Chief Brody and slaps him in the face, and then follows that with, "You knew it. You knew there was a shark out there. You knew it was dangerous. You knew all those things, but still my boy is dead now." And the article continues to go on and more or less analogize Trump and his lack of action with the mayor, the chief of police, and basically all the leadership of Amity in Jaws, and basically be like, yeah, these are people that know other people are dying, and they're just letting it happen willy-nilly, and basically analogizing it to how powerful of a scene that was, that, you know, she's going up to one man who really believes in the shark and slapping him in the face and blaming him for the, for the death of her son. I was going to say murder, but it's the animal kingdom laws, you see. It's a little tricky. Yeah, no, I mean, seeing that, there's a lot of stores being reopened, and I know LA County has been clamoring to be reopened. Santa Clarita, Palmdale, and Lancaster are creating their own kind of team to expedite the reopening process with their LA County Board of Supervisors supervisor. And so, yeah, it's the tenaciousness of, we got to have everything open, and we got to do this and we got to do that. But we know that people are going to continue dying, and people are going to continue being sick because people are continuing to be in contact with each other when they shouldn't be.
Right. Now, I'm not sure if you heard Mayor Garcetti's, I guess, reopening of non-essential businesses, except restaurants, for some reason. So I was recently in a conversation with my stepdad about this, because we used to like frequent thrift stores and like secondhand stores and whatnot. Those are apparently reopening in the Los Angeles community. I don't know if you read about that, but it's very tongue-in-cheek though, because if you're so worried about being at risk of catching COVID, why would you be rooting around other people's shit? You know? And again, you know, you could either disprove me on this or not, because this was actually told to me, oh God, yesterday. So it would have been today that this would have went into effect. Everything still looks barren to me, you know? Granted, I don't leave my house unless it's for work anymore. So, nor would I even want to step foot in a thrift store at this time. But I mean, it used to be a big hobby of mine. But I mean, I don't know. How is it over there where you are? You know, because I know you're not. Because we were talking before the recording started about how, you know, you're not really in Los Angeles County. You're like a subcategorization of Los Angeles County. Point is, has anything opened where you're at?
Well, I technically am. I'm in LA County. I'm just unincorporated, so I'm not part of any. Well, let's put it this way. I'm in an area that I don't even think has a town council. That's how minuscule we are. We don't have our own city council or our own like neighborhood town council. We're basically, our leadership is just straight up our LA County supervisor, who, at least where I live, she's basically been lobbying for all of the cities where I live up in northern LA County. She's been lobbying for them to have a faster reopening. And on top of that, I know that the city closest to me, which is, or at least it has been, I did get some word about it the other night, but it has been working on trying to figure out a quicker way to reopen things. And I know, you know, even as recent as a month ago, they were opening things up that Eric Garcetti and the rest of LA County said were closed. But, you know, it's just, I also live next to a city that is in open opposition to LA County in regards to its stay-at-home orders and their extension. So I live in an area that, at least according to the LA Times, is one of the top 10 towns, among the top 10 towns and cities with coronavirus cases, which is something that is reported. It's just nobody points it out.
Well, which is really ironic, too, because compared to the rest of LA County, your population is abysmal.
I don't know, man.
I
I mean,
mean,
that's just it.
I mean,
It's
come on. Even you said that it's fucking Tatooine.
Well,
You
it
know,
only
like,
feels that way because it's widespread, but that's just it. If we had a smaller piece of land, or if we were in like a more tight knit area, even though we like to think we're in a tight knit area, it feels like we're in a Grand Theft Auto map, to be honest with you. But
fucking cheat
it's
codes, man.
it's more like, hey, those cheat codes though. It's more
Yeah,
like had it been any tighter or had it been any smaller, it would have been closer to something like Northridge, or like even closer to like North Hollywood. But because it's so widespread, there's still a ton of people. It's just it feels so spaced out because it's overlapping this huge area that's like a quarter of the size of LA County. And it's I don't even think it's a quarter of LA County, but it's still massive enough. So, but at the same time, you know, it's basically just how the city is conflating with numbers, or how it's managing those numbers in regards to cases and whatnot. And you know, yeah, all the numbers are minimal, but that's in comparison to the rest of the county. And when you add it all together, it doesn't make a small number. So it's kind of like for the
right.
people that think,
Well, I mean,
oh, well,
yeah. I mean, it's also daunting to look at the total and make that be the first thing that you see, um,
yeah,
whether it be deaths and or recorded cases. And then you have to look at the people that are recovered, right? And the people that are
right.
recovered are in no way, shape, or form, percentage wise, in comparison to those who have already lost the fight to COVID or who currently have
Yeah.
it. So that number is always going to be looming. And I think in California, at least, just sort of like a grand encompassing total, it was neck and neck for a while.
Mhm.
At least that's what I saw, like maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 1 week ago. And for a moment, I
Right.
kind of had high hopes because I was in Northridge the other day, and um, I was talking with my girlfriend, and we were just like, oh, so like California is like the second state to, I guess, kind of lift their ban on certain businesses or whatever. Like they become a lot more lenient when it comes to
Mhm.
that. And don't quote me on this, but I mean, it certainly
Right.
feels that way. Uh, yeah, no,
Well, it's there's been a lot of reactionary actions being done in Sacramento. Whether it's all of the hubbub over churches and how many, what percentage of churchgoers can be in church, and then Trump saying that, he has the authority to override whatever the governors decide. And so Newsom responded with, okay, fine, now churches can have 25% capacity. I mean, it's stuff like that that's frankly very concerning, and I think I can imagine a lot of people that are grumpy with how this has been handled by the federal government. I can imagine just some of the very same people that'll be just as grumpy with the governor of California if there's another peak.
mhm.
Because again, I've been telling people this constantly, which is there's a lot of health experts saying that June is going to be terrible. And I understand right now there's this vague sense that things are starting to get back to normal. Um, and that's just it. Every person who tries to argue with me, oh, I think we flattened the curve. Oh, we flattened. Again, it's the mantra and the mentality of people in the state who, they're small business owners themselves, and then on top of that, there's the people that are trying to make this into some kind of identity politics, which it isn't. It's biological health. It's human health. Like it's common sense and how to keep yourself from getting sick. And I think, you know, the fact that this country doesn't understand how to respond to that pretty much says everything I need to know about why this country never seems to want healthcare, except when its people want healthcare. And then even then it's like, nah, people don't need it. And then people are like, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's frustrating and it's obnoxious and it's just kind of like, you know, you can't be thinking about this as it's the economy or my life. And it's like, well, that's pretty pathetic if you're boiling that down for yourself. And then to top that off, you have the likes of Chris Christie and Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana basically saying things along the lines of, well, we can't have an economy tanking. Yeah, people are going to die, but, or Senator Kennedy saying, a reporter said, there's people that need more money. There's people that have already used their $1,200, and his response was, yeah, and there's people in hell that need ice water. And it's like,
wait, what?
Yeah. Oh, this is
Okay.
the same guy who asked Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearing whether or not he believed in God. Like, that's a prerequisite for being on the Supreme Court.
That is
like
funny. Say what you want about conservatives, but they make a good joke here and there. Here and there. Not all the time. Here and there.
It's just kind of like we're living in this time where corporate greed and soullessness are reaching a peak that I would argue the last time we saw anything like this was like the Gilded Age of the late 19th century. I mean, we're seeing this, upper class snootyism.
I mean, shit, you could just go the way of Mitt Romney and say corporations are people, and then you don't have anything on your consciousness.
To quickly touch back on the Jaws story, because there's this one and there's also another Jaws story as well. So I'm just gonna quickly read these last two paragraphs of this first story. And so we will fight and die, isolate in health and illness, support our medical responders, and pray they stay standing. We will wear our face masks and redistribute our wealth through various crisis funds. We will demand aid from the man we elected president, but we won't expect much because he, like the Amity mayor, is there simply to be forced into better than late than never pronouncements while the real heroes do the work. But when it's over, and it will be over, although no one knows when or how many sequels will be spawned, let's all take a moment to honor Fierro, who in 1975 became the voice of a fictional town, and in 2020, the voice of us all. Let us all flip back our black veils and speak the undeniable truth to the man who ignored science and his own advisors and common sense. You knew all these things, but still our people, who are supposed to be your people, are dead.
That's ominous.
In the book, she's like dropping f-bombs at Martin Brody. Like I felt that.
I was gonna say that was a little bit tame.
Well, it's a PG movie in the 1970s. Like they can't be saying, Fuddrucker this and cheese and crackers that. So yeah, I know my film verbiage. And then you had this much more recent story from last week with the headline of "With coronavirus, pretending everything is okay won't make it so." To which, with that headline, you're thinking, how does that relate to Jaws? Well, let's just say the featured image is of a great white shark, which is basically all you need to know about how this is related to Jaws, outside of some really decent writing in here, where the author, David Shribman, kind of goes down like a path, like go down memory lane with history, where he's pointing out like moments in history where there's been an epidemic and people have been like, it'll be okay, and basically have let people die, including this one really good paragraph. Not so bad in New York and other cities in the 1830s, when President Andrew Jackson one of Donald Trump's White House heroes, repeatedly understated a raging cholera pandemic for fear of spoiling the era's economic boom. Not so bad, too, in the fictional resort town of Amity Island, where in the blockbuster 1975 film Jaws, Mayor Larry Vaughn, and they spelled his last name wrong, worried about the town's economy, overruled Police Chief Martin Brody's order to close the beaches after a shark attack. Mayor Vaughn, you yell shark, and we've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July. Chief Brody, you open the beaches on the 4th of July, it's like ringing the dinner bell. And the rest of the story kind of keeps going from there with more Jaws allusions with, coronavirus and all the people that are so desperate to reopen things and be ignorant in the face of clear, obvious statistics. I was jumping when I saw these just because I was like, hey, I wasn't crazy with my Jaws theory. And then I saw Jaws 2 recently, and I was like, wow, it is amazing how you can get away with shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue.
And artistically, wow, how could these movies get any worse?
Oh, watching my parents' response to this movie was the highlight of the whole experience, let me tell you. I have never, when the shark dies, I've never seen my dad react like the way he did.
Hold on. You're telling me the shark dies?
Yeah. Which means, so
thanks for spoiling the movie.
Hey, it's a Jaws movie. Like, that happens in every Jaws movie. There's no, cliffhanger, because they never wanted a cliffhanger with any of these movies. But yeah.
Didn't they make 4 of them?
They made 4.
So
yeah.
You want to talk about no cliffhangers? Was that all you wanted to talk about regarding that? Because speaking of cliffhangers, this is actually
I'll definitely share them online so people know what bout of insanity I recently dealt with in recalling our Jaws / Jurassic Park episode. But what you have to bring up is very interesting, especially in the age of COVID.
Well, speaking of cliffhangers, okay, I'm going to introduce you to 5 key topics that are going to mold your mind, okay? Now, I want you to stay with me on this one. No, I'm kidding. I can't even fucking do it with a straight face.
I don't know. You had me sold, and you also had me scared for a second.
Yeah. If you click the link in the description, you can sign up for my free ebook. You get, it's gonna make it really, really simple. Okay, I'm one of those nice people online that's gonna make this process very streamlined. So what I'm gonna need you to do, Mancini, is very, very simple. You following me? Good. I'm gonna need you to get out your little card that's in your wallet. Typically, it has a bunch of numbers on it. It's predominantly from an institution, a bank. I'm gonna need you to read off those numbers. Now, you still with me here?
Oh God.
I'm gonna need you to also read off those 3 numbers on the back, and we're gonna get you started with the level 1 tier. Now. Can't fucking do it.
Oh, God.
A couple of days ago, I was scrolling through YouTube. To preface all of this, that little bit, not bit dribble.
Mm-hmm.
I was on YouTube a few days ago, and I came across this YouTube channel. Now, keep in mind, I think it's pretty obvious that people use YouTube every day, but it's not very often that you come across a channel that just, kind of clicks. James Janney, a YouTube financial advisor / commentator / satirist in a lot of ways. I have just been hooked on his videos, predominantly the ones featuring fake self-help gurus, and he calls them entrepreneurs, and I just sort of fell down this rabbit hole. And you know about this because I sent you the link, but I wanted to bring it up and touch upon this because in the age of Corona, what does it mean for the consumer to feel that he or she can buy into something that is quote unquote get rich quick, even though it's not marketed as a get rich quick scheme? The hope is there Now, keep in mind with these people, if you've never met a Ty Lopez, a Gary Vaynerchuk, a Grant Cardone, a wishy-washy fucking snake oil salesman, first of all, play Red Dead Redemption. You'll get a taste of that. If you've never met one of these people, most likely you've scrolled through them on Facebook and hit the report button. But if you've actually taken the time to listen to any one of these, if you've ever taken the time to buy a self-help book off of Amazon or feel as though your life is in shambles, which, to tell you the truth, if you're living in 2020 as of now, you pretty much do financially. So it's very easy for these people to market these this quote unquote advice, because what it is it's not advice. They're selling you a dream, a pipe dream. If you are dumb enough to buy into this nonsense, then, well, first of all, if you're dumb enough to be impressionable, especially during the times to buy into this nonsense, I really don't know what to say. I suggest that you all check out James Janney's YouTube channel, where he goes through it step by step, even though this ironically sounds like it's a fucking scheme. It really isn't. He goes into the ins and outs of this mindset without being too, with really cutting the bullshit. And I know a lot of these gurus and these business moguls, they kind of say the same thing. I'm going to cut the bullshit. We're going to get you rich in 30 days. No. I find it so interesting because of what I do. I figured you would as well because of what you do. Both of us love to write. And in a lot of ways, I think both of us like to publish in our own regard. So, I mean, I could sit here and take pot shots all day. But what I really want to know is what you think about all this. Because you didn't necessarily buy into the self-help train, but
No.
you've had your fair share of instances with it, and I know you have a specific example, let's just say, that I know you wanted to show.
Yeah. For me, I growing up, I was definitely one of those people that wanted to be, motivational for people and wanted to be kind of a source of enlightenment or a source of people to just kind of go on with their lives in a much more, I guess, positive trajectory, as weird as that sounds. And, and some of it tied in with, stuff that I had gone through as like a teenager that I won't go into right now, but basically like it led me down a path of wanting to be almost like a therapist for people, or a psychiatrist in some way.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off when you say that, but it's interesting that you say therapist, because in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of these people are trying to be that way, disguising it as selling a product. They want to be I'll be there for you to walk you through each and every step of the way, which is really disingenuous. But
yeah,
sorry.
But I'll pause it it way, because you're on the right track as to kind of because when I look at kind of the self-help genre, I kind of see it not so much from the point of view that the people that are trying to be like the gurus themselves are trying to be the teachers and the mentors. I kind of look at it as they're the abstract, and everybody who buys into this guru's product is basically like the guru splainer. So you get into any of these guys, and you basically and that's just it too. And this is something we were talking about as well. For me, especially trying to understand what like the self-help guru is like, it's very simple. You just look at how the televangelists are. Whether it's Pat Robertson or I mean, but I bring that up because in my opinion there isn't far too much of a difference when you have someone who's trying to be the self-help guru, and in reality they're more like basically one giant placebo.
Well, yeah. Well,
And
I mean, what it is it's a cult-like mass, you know.
right,
And unlike the proverbial Jonestown picnic, these people keep coming back for more. Okay,
yeah,
because there was one testimonial that I want to say student of the entrepreneur, I think his name is Dan Locke,
mm-hmm.
and you can look him up. He's a very flashy dresser kind of guy. And again, none of these name drops are supposed to be an attack in any way, shape, or form. But there is
Right,
a formulaic attempt on how they get people hooked on keeping them interested in their advice, in their product. And it's not even a product. It's really a mindset of, oh, you got to do this, and then the sales will start coming in, like drop shipping or what have you, any other skeevy attempt to
yeah,
offshore products and sell them at a fucked up higher price. But there was this one student from Dan Locke's testimonial who gave his credit card on stage because he was swiping the credit card on stage, right, to charge people right then and there for his class, and it
right.
got declined. And the man was in literal tears, saying verbatim, "It's not enough. You don't understand how much I would sell my soul to get this information." Granted, this was all happening before COVID-19 and everything like that, but
Mm-hmm.
if we're talking from the perspective of an artist, any artist who is maybe in dire need or in a decent financial situation, and they may want some extra earnings
Mm-hmm.
or another passive income stream, who's to say the people who don't know any better or are experiencing this self-help sphere for the first time
Mm-hmm.
are going to make the right choices? They're not. They're going to think that, well, there's so many people doing this and there's so many people making money off of this. This has to work for me, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, on top of that too, that's just it. For a time like basically for a time like the one we're living in, there's a lot of profit to be had, not only in regards to the self-help gurus, but there's also the self-help gurus who require self-help. I mean, I know a few people, without naming any names, I know some people that they work like they're self-help mentors for other people, and yet these
Right.
are people that have openly expressed the fact that you know, they're grappling with something while in quarantine. And I get that.
Yeah.
I've done the same thing, but I do it in a way where I'm not tapping into the general consensus of the masses.
Well, it's
If I'm going to
also,
express my grief
yeah.
or my frustration, I find some way to channel it, and I do it in a way where it's quick, it's brief, have at it. It's an Instagram story. It'll die in 24 hours. Hey,
Yeah.
look, apocalypto.
This is a direct contrast to what you may see from these gurus' attitudes, because unlike sort of the actual humble approach that,
Mhm.
I think people like you and me take of, hey, I made something and I want to showcase it. I'm not looking for people licking my boots or whatever, but
Right.
it's just a matter of I made something for the sole purpose of me wanting to make it. Now, in contrast, when you have the condescendingly sanctimonious attitudes of people being like, if you want this shit, you're just going to have to work 80 hours a week, okay? And there's really
Yeah.
nothing to it. It is extremely tough. No, actually, it is extremely easy, and James Janney touched into this into his video, which I highly recommend that you check out. I hope it'll be included in the description of this episode.
Oh yeah.
But it is extremely easy, as he said, to fall into the cycle of the quote unquote hustle culture where you're doing something for the sake of you feeling as if you're progressing, but really you're not. You're keeping busy because you think that it's making you get to that next step when it really isn't. It's just taking up
So
your time.
so that was something I wanted to talk with you about
Okay.
because I
Great
have
segue then.
I kind of have a two-pronged reaction to that because I heard what he had to say about sort of the hustle culture that's kind of part of the gig economy and really just the economy in general. And you know, I think that is just it, is that the term hustle has become this word with multiple meanings in a way,
I mean,
because he does point out that you have.
it definitely has just such a cringy connotation because you expect people working to have some level of humbleness to it. But really, with this advent of social media, you want people to see you working. How is that humble at all? Okay. It's almost the argument that people have, and this is kind of a far stretch, but I was thinking about this while I was at work. It's sort of the argument that people have over the act of uh, like sex work. Now,
Right.
you have the act itself, which personally, I don't have a problem with it. I feel that people, no matter uh, male, female, and everything in between, should be able to do, should they want to. I feel like it's the maybe attitudes associated with it. And you typically find this on social media where it's the whole, I did this, you didn't, therefore I'm better. And I've seen this on Twitter,
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is the case,
Well,
but
so
it's also
what you're saying is basically you've got the branch of people that they say they're hustling when they're really not, and then you have the people that are really grinding themselves down, and that is because they are legit,
yeah, no.
hustlers in every
They are
respect.
they are legit hustlers, but like Janny said, you could be hustling 24/7,
Hmm.
but if you're not finding that niche, if you're not establishing yourself in that market or making a name for yourself, which in the artistic community is very hard to do,
Yeah.
because let's face it, what you're doing has probably already been done to some degree, then you're also losing. So it's a lose-lose. It really is.
Right.
And, I'm not saying that every success story has to be a stroke of luck to some degree, but I really do personally, I wouldn't use the word hustle maybe as much as you would because of the connotation that it sits with me, because of what
Right.
I've seen represented on social media predominantly, because that is where I work in, unfortunately,
Hmm.
where, hey, I'm going to say I'm doing this for the sole purpose of bragging. This is solely, or not solely, but the subtext is there that me doing this makes me a better person than you. And that just doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I don't think I'm very wrong in myself to be turned off by that disposition. I don't think I'm wrong to sort of X out of the tab when I'm just like, all right, well, fuck this guy, you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I mean, I guess my kind of approach to it is I've become far more sympathetic to the term, largely because of not only just myself and my own capabilities as as a laborer, have become far more physical the older that I've gotten, but then on top of that, I'm realizing that there are people that are legit hustling because it's a matter of having a home tomorrow or next week or next month. And so they have to hustle. Like, I think there's the culture within our society that kind of abuses the term, and then there's the culture within our society that it legit counts and it legit matters. Because I would argue I know a fair number of people, and I would throw myself into this mix where we be hustling. We're fighting tooth and nail, and these are people that work in media. These are people that they're just working so that they have a good financial situation, even though with the jobs that they've got, it may not be good enough, but at least it's something to stay afloat on for a short while. And that's just it too. When it comes to the motivational speakers and sort of the cult-like nature of self-help. This kind of goes back to some of the book discussions we've had, and it's something that James talks about a lot in his video, where there's all these authors that you can read from that tell you like what paths to go down and how to do this and how to be a better coworker and whatnot, and
I mean,
how to breathe easier. Like,
let me put it to you this way:
go ahead.
if you feel motivated to pick up a book and read a book about motivation, then why can't you just be motivated about starting?
Right.
I
mean, if anything, what you should be doing, because this is something that I've always pursued, and I've been somebody that I'm like everybody else. I've dealt with my own ups and downs, and the kinds of things that people seeking self-help would request. But for me, at least, my mentality has been seeking out people with ideas that go beyond, how do you improve yourself, or how do you improve your well-being, or something like. And it was funny because I told you about the one book that I'm about to bring up, but I actually just now realized of another book that I own that could be determined as self-help-ish, although arguably it's philosophy. It's a book by Daniel Dennett called Intuition Pumps. And it's basically that, and that's just it. This is where it kind of gets into this territory of, for me, the idea of a book that's going to help you is a book that's going to challenge your mind, a book that's going to challenge your method of thinking. And basically, this is something I've adhered to since my last birthday. It's also something that one of my favorite authors once brought up in an interview sometime in the early 2000s, where for me it's about reading from people that challenge me into thinking, why do I do what I do? Why do I create content? Why do I do this podcast? Why do I write?
I mean, in a lot of ways, that doesn't even have to necessarily conform to philosophy, like you said. I mean,
no, it doesn't.
I know you don't. I know you don't read fiction, at least as much.
Oh, I've actually been reading more fiction probably now than I've had for a long time. Like, I have moments. I'll put it this way: I have moments.
Yeah.
Like I just finished reading the Andromeda Strain, and it was terrifying.
Oh yeah.
So, and I guess if anything, I've turned to fiction only because I still love history, but with fiction, it's giving me some kind of an alternative to either history or depressing reality. It just gives me an alternative because the reality I live in feels so fictional. But another point too is just simply the cultish nature of the self-help, class. It's kind of like, if you're relying on somebody that much for your own well-being, it leads to a lot of questions, obviously. And a lot of those can be critical of the individual themselves.
Well, also, just dialing it back to the gurus, it does bring up a lot of questions to which there are no answers for. Okay, this is a lot of open-ended information that you were supposed to take at face value, because the goal of this is supposed to adapt to what you're currently wanting to put out there in the world. So this advice could be, it's intended to be ubiquitous, whether you want to go into real estate, into publishing, into drop shipping, into sales. This is supposed to work on any sort of playing field, right? But have you ever read a book or looked at a painting or looked at a piece of media and thought, this is so open-ended to a point where it's just not even worth analyzing?
Oh yeah,
that's what it's like, and they
all the time,
and they not peruse. What's the word? They hoodwink you into believing that it's informative, because there's a lot of buzzwords being floated around of, you need to apply this, and this, when it's all made up as it's being said.
Right. Yeah.
And it creates a sense of urgency when people say, we're offering this for a limited time only. That's why you need to pay now. It's just a bunch of open-ended nonsense that, short of telemarketing, will not die.
Well, that's something I could really rant about, but I won't go that far. I've already had that discussion once today. Ooh. But on top of that too, and this all just kind of segues into your point, which is this is where you get into the danger of demagoguery, because in a lot of ways I've kind of narrowed it down to where the self-help theme genre, if you will, like it's in a lot of ways it's like a secular religion. Especially when it comes to, the people that look up to, whatever gurus are giving them advice, and they look up to them, and they're buying all the books, and they're watching all their videos, and it's something that it's dangerous no matter where you see it. I mean, I see it all the time in politics. I saw it cross from journalism to politics with a recent congressional race in my congressional district, where basically having an individual constantly say "we,"
Yeah.
that's asinine, because how could you be saying "we"? You don't know what my thoughts or my preferences are in terms of how we should move forward. Yeah, you may be on the same side as me, but that doesn't necessarily mean I know that. And even if you do make that abundantly clear, how exactly are you going to handle it? Are you going to handle it as a narcissist, or are you going to handle it as a level-headed leader within the community? And the reason why I bring that up is because, I already kind of had these methods of thinking on my mind before I read this, but there's a perfect point on this very topic of be careful of the we in this book called Letters to a Young Contrarian by the late journalist Christopher Hitchens. Excuse me. To which he said, "A note on language. Be even more suspicious than I was just telling you to be of all those who employ the term we or us without your permission. This is another form of surreptitious conscription designed to suggest that we are all agreed on our interests and identity. Populist authoritarians try to slip it past you. So do some kinds of literary critics. Always ask who this we is." That's his point, is being mindful of people that say we want this and we do that. Obviously, for any good journalist, that's the way you have to treat every public official, because they're always going to be saying we. Yeah, I've just never bought much into it. I mean, I think, at least at this point in time, I can understand why people are going to revert to it and look at it as some kind of source of guidance. But at the same time, use this time period as an opportunity to just advance yourself if you can. If you have the means to, like, don't let this pass you by as, well, I'm just going to watch, The Real Housewives, or I'm going to spend this time, making quilts. Like there's ways that you can put yourself in a better state of mind and put yourself in a better kind of, I don't know, give yourself a better sense of what you're doing than just blindly following what a bunch of people that have made millions of dollars off of saying it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Oh, yeah.
It's not your fault.
But you know what? But you know what? That is the business, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The business is that these people are going to keep blaming themselves. It is my fault. And this is the Messiah that's going to fix it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Without people to not constantly self-doubt themselves and be a targeted audience of people who are unhappy with their jobs, their relationships, their inner peace, God knows what, any factor of issue, there's no audience. Because say one self-help book, from one self-help book to the 1,000th, basically relaying the same information,
Mm-hmm.
one person gets it, they are no longer a customer, and that's
Right.
not what they want, right?
Right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it is just one big business. And like I said in Mitt Romney's voice, oh, corporations are people. Huh?
Well, and don't forget
Yeah.
too that you have a lot of these people that, you know, it's not like it is. I mean, you hit on the head. It's not that it's something that it gets resolved. It's basically like
No, because it's not
like
supposed to get
living with
resolved.
something.
Yeah.
Right. You're basically you're living. It's like living with a parasite. But the fact of the matter is, it's not biological, or unless it is, it's probably not biological in any way, which means it's probably something you can get rid of. However, if it's something neurological, then it's an entirely different set of circumstances. But by
Well,
that point, you
yeah.
shouldn't be seeking self-help. You should be seeking a doctor. You
Well,
know,
it's like I said, and this will just
God.
kind of, well, it's like I said, and this will just kind of be the point to end out on.
Yeah.
If you feel, self-affirmed in your judgment of what I'm doing is the correct thing to do, and at the end of the day, my independence is really all that matters, not to mention me being my best and worst critic, speaking artistically.
Hmm.
Why the hell would I have to need anyone else's advice when they're obviously trying to sell me something? And to the people that don't know that it's essentially a scam, you know, I hope that they one day do learn.
Hmm.
That's all you can really do, like we said in the beginning of the episode, is just to move forward. And in a lot of ways be better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a form of belief that I've adhered to for a long time. It's I've made it clear I'm not religious, but that's probably the closest I would ever get, is just simply, people can be better. We've already talked about in the past how we can't necessarily trust people by themselves to be responsible for themselves, but we at least want to trust people to be better so that they can. But alas, that seems to keep getting delayed somehow. I guess to wrap it up, it's an interesting topic that I think a lot of people are very retrospective of right now. And for me, at least, it's been fascinating to see people that I know who are very expressive with what they're going through and kind of what they're seeking as help. And obviously, the hardest part about any of this is the fact that it's not like there's a lot of these people that are able to go up to people that they know and tell them all about it. I mean, I think that's just it, is, you know, having something to say and wanting to bring it up to somebody is not what it used to be, and it sucks. And I mean, in my situation, I wake up in the morning, I see something on my phone, I know I've got at least one of my parents that I can complain to, but I know not everybody has that, and it's unfortunate, but I think at the same time it's a way that people can move around their circumstances and try and find a way to improve their situation to the best of their ability. We definitely got onto a more somber note with these last two subjects, I gotta say.
I'm glad that they ended how they did, though. And in the end, somberness eventually can equate to a new beginning, as I like to say, for a lot
Well,
of things.
if anything, it just teaches us the same old thing, which is we got to have those beaches open by the 4th of July. I mean,
Hell
literally,
yeah.
the space-time continuum is dependent on that. Um, the beaches, the beaches.
Why don't you go
Oh
tell the good
man,
people where they could find you?
oh boy. So, when I'm not online trying to campaign for one thing or another, you can always find me on Instagram at Mancini Ryan. I'm trying to watch more movies again, so you're gonna see a lot of what I'm seeing, whether that's Jaws 2 or Apocalypto or Trumbo or whatever that may be. As for Twitter, as I continue to watch the industry that I will love to the bitter end, journalism, as I slowly watch journalism kill itself, you can find me on Twitter at ManciniRA, and hopefully these times will stop being so unprecedented, but I know that's just wishful thinking. Off to you, buddy.
You can find me as well on Instagram as well as Twitter. It's going to be at Dr. Sebi. That's at DRSEBBY for Instagram. I recently posted my graduation photo in front of a Taco Bell. Would not want it any other way. You can also find me on Twitter as well. I actually just went on there in like a week and immediately logged off because it's still terrible, and I refuse to go on apps that are terrible. So you can find me there on at DR_SEBBY. You could also find me through a plethora of other means. You could also find me. God, I've repeated that over and over. You could also find me. You can find me as well on YouTube under the monochrome Seabass. Yes, spelled like the fish. I post daily narrations on there, as well as on Anchor on a separate project that I do called Shugsy's Storytime. Basically just the audio files found on YouTube for your convenience. Currently, I have a 5% listener base in Switzerland. I don't know what the fuck's happening. So, yeah, that's good. And feel free to send me a manuscript if you happen to want to publish a book at seboibookacct@gmail.com. If that's too fast for you, then you can either rewind the episode a bit, or go to www.sebastianshugpublishing.com. You could also find me on Google, Sebastian Shug. I don't know why I just didn't preface it with that. You can find everything through there. I need some water.
Oh, I do too. Jeez. And before we let everybody go, one last shout out that I'd like to leave off with. Our buddy Pete is getting his own West Coast sports newsletter started. It's something well worth checking out. I had a chance to look over it, and it looks excellent. If there's anything I've come to learn over the last 5 to 6 years, is that having more West Coast represented media, no matter what it is, podcast, newsletter, newspaper, you name it, we need more of it. And it's something far well worth checking out. If you want to check it out, head on over to westcoastsports.substack. That's westcoastsports.substack.com.
You've been listening to Mars on Life. Please make sure that you find us over on social media at Mars on Life Show on both Twitter and on Instagram. And on top of that, you can find this show on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Our artwork is done by Zachary Erbrick, and our intro music is Space Explorers by Kevin MacLeod. I've been Ryan Mancini. My co-host, as always, is Sebastian Shug. And just remember, if you keep on going, you'll make it to Mars.